Hello, everyone. I'm Marcel Vanderweer, editor of OHS Canada, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today for this webinar. Today's session, Communication at a Distance, Advancing Hearing Protection and Communication Solutions for a Changing World, will explain how to enable critical communication from a distance to help reduce the number of workers potentially exposed to occupational hazards. With that, I'd like to introduce Bev Borst and Pegeen Smith. Bev is a technical specialist and certified occupational health nurse for 3M Canada. Pegeen is a board certified occupational health nurse working as an application engineer with 3M. Over to you guys.
Thank you, Marcel, and thank you to OH Canada for inviting us, 3M, Pegeen and myself, to speak to you today regarding communication at a distance, advanced hearing protection and communication solutions. As with all presentations delivered by 3M, please note that the content of this presentation belongs to 3M. It is current and accurate to the best of our knowledge. Please consult other authorities for any regulatory decisions about your own hearing conservation program, and do not depend on this presentation alone for guidance. The content is intended to be educational in nature. However, please note that Pegeen and I are employees of 3M, a manufacturer of hearing protectors and other PPE. For today's session, we have two learning objectives. To understand the advantages of advanced hearing protection and communication technologies. And when we say advanced hearing protection devices, we mean hearing protectors that have electronics that allow for additional features. Secondly, today, we will help you identify areas within your workplace that may benefit from solutions that help workers communicate at a distance. We have 4 polling questions during our presentation to allow for input from you. Here is the first polling question. Do you have employees in your hearing conservation program who need to communicate with others to perform their jobs? Yes or no? The poll results are up. So an overwhelming 82% said yes, we do have employees who need to communicate with others performing their jobs. 18% said no. So let's move along to hearing protector selection criteria. This leads us to our next polling question. What is the most important factor when you select hearing protection, either for you, yourself, or your employees? Is it comfort and ease? Is it compatibility with other personal protective equipment? Is it the attenuation, the noise reduction rating? Is it cost, audibility, or need to communicate? So we'll just wait while people are voting. So let's look at the results here. The highest number was the noise reduction rating. So 50% of the people said noise reduction rating. And that's not a surprise to us. We often hear that the NRR, and often it's the highest NRR, and we'll talk about what does that mean throughout the presentation. Second most important is comfort and ease of use, and that is a critical component or factor. Because if an earplug isn't comfortable, you're probably not going to wear it right. And it has to be easy to use. Compatibility with other PPE is at 3%, cost at 8, and audibility needs to communicate at 8%. Thank you for your feedback. Here is a list of criteria used to select hearing protectors, either for yourself or your employees. As you can see, the two yellow-orange circles there are required elements. Knowing your noise exposure, and that's meaning knowing what your 8-hour average exposure is. And secondly, what is the noise reduction needed? And for us in Canada, that's either the NRR or the CSA class. And the attenuation, the NRR or CSA class is the attenuation capabilities of the hearing protector. There are many other factors that should be considered. Focusing on just the required elements limit the opportunity to go beyond regulatory compliance and do best practice. Let's consider a more holistic approach to selecting hearing protection. We know to be true, but tend to forget that each person, worker, excuse me, is a unique individual with unique ear anatomy, differing ideas of what comfort is, different skill level for inserting earplugs, and some people may have pre-existing hearing impairment. Each application is different. The working conditions and the environment can differ. Temperature, you could have extreme cold or very hot. You could have high humidity, and looking at some other elements. What other PPE are the workers required to wear? And are they compatible with the hearing protector selected? And finally, what about the workers' need for audibility and communication? While they're doing their job. As a hearing conservation manager, are you evaluating the audibility and communication needs of your worker? Have you ever wondered if hearing protection compliance is related to the worker's audibility and communication needs? One thing is for sure, not all factors are equivalent in all situations. And the level of importance with each of the criteria listed here can vary with the task, the dynamic listening situation, and the industry. Consider this. According to OSHA, 9 out of 10 workers are exposed to 95 decibels or less. So this begs the question, how much protection or attenuation do workers really need? Do you need to offer the highest NRR when you're looking at a noise level of 95 dB? What about overprotection? Overprotection will be discussed in more detail by Peggy in a few more slides. For many, if not most, traditional hearing protectors will meet a worker's protection needs and not present any significant issues regarding their need for audibility as they perform their job duties. Traditional hearing protection, earplugs and earmuffs, sometimes referred to as passive hearing protection, is the most commonly issued hearing protection devices. They provide linear attenuation, meaning that the attenuation remains essentially the same regardless of the noise environment. They are relatively low cost and a great solution for workers, especially those who do not desire or need audibility and communication. However, depending on the job, some workers need to communicate via electronic devices, for example, radios. And if they work in hazardous noise and are required to wear hearing protection, they may find it challenging to hear what they want or what they need to hear through that noise. And with a traditional hearing protector. This can also be true for a worker who have other auditory needs while working in hazardous levels of noise. The world and the workplace has changed due to COVID-19. As employers and workers adjust to this new normal, they are confronting new demands. a workplace that is managing the complexities of a global pandemic while keeping employees safe, healthy, and efficient. So let's look at audibility and communication considerations. What are the challenges during this pandemic? Workplaces may have initiated new work routines, such as physical distancing, increased hygiene practices, and new disinfection processes. Other challenges could have included lower staffing levels, high employee turnover, and the need to maintain physical distancing. Workplaces may have also instituted the need to wear facial coverings. I'll talk more about this on the next slide. What are the challenges with face coverings and communication? There are at least 3 issues that make communication challenging. There was a recent study published this year conducted for the healthcare environment that shows that masks attenuate the high frequencies. That means it lowers the ability to hear those high frequencies. The amount of degradation depends on the mask, and there was as high as a 12 decibel drop. This is especially significant because it is affecting the frequencies that most contribute to our ability to distinguish between consonant sounds, thus affecting our ability to understand speech. Secondly, when we cover our faces, we lose our ability to see facial expressions and see each other's lips. And lastly, as it turns out, wearing a mask affects how you produce speech, and you may be raising your voice and straining your voice. According to ASHA, the American Speech Language Hearing Association, wearing a mask or face covering makes communication more difficult. And this was posted on their website just this past June. I will now pass the presentation over to Peggy.
Thanks, Bev. It's a pleasure to be working with my Canadian colleague. I'm really happy to be here. I'm going to be talking today about advanced hearing protection solutions. These advanced hearing protector and communication solutions, they are hearing protectors first, but they're combined with electronic functions to improve hearing and communication when needed. These products fall into 3 main categories: protective hearing, protective communication, and protective entertainment. I'm going to focus on the ones that affect communication at a distance the most, which would be protective hearing and protective communication. The hearing protection attribute of these products are the same as their passive hearing protector counterparts. But this family of products allow for additional capabilities, such as environmental listening, communication device interface, and/or entertainment. The benefits of these types of devices is that they can provide improved situational awareness. They can also allow workers to communicate at a distance. They may improve productivity and worker efficiencies. And they also may assist with worker compliance, as well as improve employee morale. So let's begin by discussing the first category, which is protective hearing. Protective hearing helps protect hearing when it's noisy, but it allows you to hear when it's quiet. Before we begin, I'd like to share a study published by Rabinowitz in 2007. The researchers reviewed 10 years of hearing loss rates for over 6,000 employees working in an aluminum manufacturing company. And they used industrial hygiene and human resource records to reconstruct the individual noise exposures. The researchers found, and I quote, "The greatest burden of preventable occupational hearing loss was found in workers whose noise exposures averaged 85 dB or less." So let that sink in for a minute. We talked about the 9 out of 10 workers being exposed to 95 dB or less. We have to start thinking differently about those working at the lower margins of the legal limits. The Rabinowitz study went on to say, and I quote, To further reduce rates of occupational hearing loss, hearing conservation programs may require innovative approaches targeting workers with noise exposures close to 85 dB. So what attenuation levels should be targeted for these workers? We certainly want to protect them, but we don't want to overprotect them. If workers are not able to clearly hear the important sounds associated with their job, an unintended consequence may be that they are tempted to intentionally poorly fit their hearing protector, or they may remove them altogether. Wearing hearing protectors improperly or inconsistently, even for a short period of time, can be hazardous and could lead to a higher risk of permanent noise-induced hearing loss. Hearing impaired workers may be at a particular disadvantage when using hearing protection because the added attenuation may further reduce their ability to detect sounds and understand speech. And we have a really nice blog that we're going to share with you at the end of the program today called Reducing the Risks of Hearing Overprotection. And we're going to include that at the end there. You'll be interested to know that CSA has also addressed this, and according to CSA Z94.2, individuals wearing a hearing protection device that provides too much attenuation can feel isolated from the surrounding environments. In addition, the sound can be perceived not only as fainter, but also as distorted. It can sound muffled. The result is that speech, noise from a machine, warning sounds, and any other sounds are perceived in an altered form by the wearer. So we're going to talk about protective hearing solutions as one of the innovative ways to target those workers exposed to the lower margins of noise exposure limits. And these products and solutions may help workers hear communication when there's intermittent or unpredictable or more moderate levels of noise, when there's periods of quiet or periods of quiet interrupted by impulsive noise. You may have workers that move in between loud and quiet areas. Think about your maintenance folks. You may have workers that have a heightened awareness or need for a heightened awareness for their surroundings due to moving vehicles, equipments, and alarms. Protective hearing solutions allow for audibility during the quiet periods so that the workers are not tempted to remove their hearing protectors like you see the worker doing in the photo on screen. Protective hearing is hearing protection with environmental listening, which is also called level-dependent technology. Some products have two types of microphones in their either in their headset or in an in-ear device. Either environmental microphones or speech communication microphones. So there's two types of microphones that these products can have. When I'm talking about environmental listening, I'm referring to the environmental microphones that actually pick up sounds nearby. I'm not talking about the speech microphone that's in front of the person's mouth. You can find environmental microphones in in-ear solutions and also in over-the-ear solutions. And it's important to note that when you turn the products off, the devices function as a passive hearing protector. But when you turn the electronics on, you have the ability to adjust the sound level and even amplify the sound coming into the ear cup or earpiece. Just as amplification can help normal hearing workers with auditory needs, it may also benefit workers with pre-existing hearing impairments. However, we don't claim these types of products to be hearing aids. All environmental listening safety products should have some sort of circuitry or an external sound limiter built into the device. So when you're shopping around for these sorts of things, make sure that you look for that. 3M's Peltor products use compression to limit the sound level through these environmental microphones down to 82 dBA. Compression, what compression does is it takes the auditory signal that is picked up by the mic, and it keeps the signal but reproduces it and limits it below lower than 82 dBA. Other manufacturers may use peak clipping, where any signal above 82 is clipped and not reproduced. So you want to figure out how they are limiting the sound coming in through those devices. Protective hearing solutions give workers the ability to have face-to-face communication and noise. Consequently, workers may be less tempted to remove their hearing protectors in an attempt to hear, and this may encourage workers to wear their hearing protectors correctly and consistently. But there's one important caveat. Environmental listening technology has limited benefits used in continuous high noise environments. You wouldn't want the environmental microphones on in a very loud, noisy area. You're just going to hear all the noise coming through those mics. So this is why we have another solution called protective communications, and I'm going to be talking about that in a few minutes. This is how environmental listening technology works. The amount of attenuation depends on the environment noise level, and then the attenuation will vary. So in quiet environments, sounds pass through, but in loud environments, sounds are compressed and the protection becomes level dependent. The protection automatically adjusts as the noise level changes. So during this presentation, I'm going to provide some audio files that are intended to simulate the functionality of hearing protectors, both passive and electronic, in a noise environment. My intention is to give you an auditory experience, but we don't claim this to be the exact auditory experience that you're going to experience when you wear these products. In each simulation, you're going to hear a noise clip with someone talking. The first example is what it would be like with an open ear, no protection. The second example is going to show you what you may hear with those two sounds underneath a passive hearing protector. And then the third example simulates the experience with environmental listening. So you hopefully you're connected to your computer sound and you'll be able to hear these. I'm going to share them here with you in a second here as soon as I open them up. If you've just dialed in, we're not sure if you can hear them. So here we go with the first sound. This is a person talking and a nail gun in open ear, meaning you're not wearing any protection at all. So here we go.
Do you copy, Joe? Gonna need you to head into the area B when you're done. Do you copy?
Okay, it started too soon here. Now it's going to be what it sounds like when you're under passive hearing protection.
Do you copy, Joe? Gonna need you to head into the area B when you're done.
The last example I'm going to have you listen to is what it would sound like if you were to use an environmental listening device, level dependent technology.
Do you copy, Joe? Gonna need you to head into the area B when you're done.
Now you may think that it sounds very similar to the open ear, and that's exactly what is happening here. But with the real level dependent technology, those higher, the peaks of that nail gun would be compressed down below 82. So I'm going to move on to the So let me give you a case study of how these protective hearing devices were used. We had a situation in an aluminum manufacturing facility where the safety manager had a big challenge. They went back to work during the pandemic and he was required to keep all of his workers at least 2 meters away. And the workers were in a hearing conservation program, so they were required to wear hearing protection, but the amount of noise was moderate and sometimes, pretty intermittent. And what was happening is that they were trying to communicate with their traditional hearing protectors, and what they would end up doing, which is kind of out of habit, they would move too close to one another and they would start trying to yell in each other's ear. So if you've, I'm sure you've seen that scenario before. Or alternatively, they needed to actually leave the hearing conservation area in order to talk. And you can imagine how inefficient that is. So the safety managers, the solution that helped the safety manager was both in-ear and over-the-head solutions equipped with environmental listening. The noise levels were lower, they turned on their environmental devices, listening devices, and they were able to communicate face-to-face but still keep a distance. So we're going to go on to the next polling question. And the question is, do you think you or your workers would benefit from environmental listening technologies? Yes, no, or maybe. So I'm going to open the polls. Give some time to have you answer. And Marcel, you can open up the results. And Bev, just let me know how things.
Yeah, so Peggy, the results are in here. So 58% of the people polled said yes, my workers would benefit from environmental listening technology. 3% said no, and 39% said maybe.
Well, good. Sounds great. Let's move on to the next section here. We just discussed protective hearing and the use of environmental listening to help workers hear in low levels of noise. Now we're going to move to the second category, which is protective communication. And these products help protect hearing, but allow the workers to clearly communicate while they're in noise. Protective communication solutions offer hearing protection first, along with the means to communicate electronically. And usually these are headsets, but there are available some in-ear solutions. The devices are capable of interfacing with radios, cell phones, and/or intercom systems, and they can be wired with cables, with or without push-to-talk devices, or they can be wireless using technologies such as Bluetooth or near-field magnetic induction, or NFMI. Some headsets have integrated radio systems built right into the headset so that the worker does not need to carry a separate radio around, which can be very convenient. Protective communication solutions enable workers to have clear communication while working in noise. These solutions also allow workers to communicate at a distance while in hazardous noise, which is why we're talking today about it, being in the middle of a pandemic. While there may be headsets that are listen only, many of these systems feature a noise canceling communication or speech microphone, which is what you can see in the photo. When two people are communicating, the speech is reproduced inside the hearing protector. Protective communication solutions enable workers to have clear communication and noise because these products increase the signal to noise ratio. And what I mean by that is, think of the signal as any sound you would like to hear, that you need to hear, such as a coworker talking or a forklift coming around the corner. And so that's the signal, that's the desired thing. The noise is what we don't desire, so machinery noise or even nuisance noise. So when the signal is higher than the noise, you're able to hear what is being communicated. If the noise is more than the signal, then you're going to have a harder time deciphering what people are communicating. So protective communication solutions, what we do is we use the passive component of that device to reduce the noise, and we use amplification of the signal so that we have a higher signal to noise ratio. Protective communication devices, like I said, are equipped with noise canceling devices. The speech or communication microphone has 2 ports on either side of the mic. And when the ambient noise reaches both ports approximately equal, they cancel each other out, and that allows for the speech signal to enter into one side and be transmitted to the inside of the ear cup of the recipient or the receiver. Protective communication with two-way radios is certainly widely used in industry and in the military. Two-way radios give workers the ability to have quick and reliable communication between workers. Work groups can be created so that messages can be broadcasted very easily. There are a few limitations. They aren't like cell phones where 2 people can talk and interrupt each other, which is what we call full duplex. Two-way radios allow one person to talk at a time. So there's some etiquette involved in knowing how you talk on a two-way radio. And that requires some training and some practice in order for them to understand that etiquette. There's also a range limited to about a mile or within a building. The radio signal can be susceptible to radio interference, like lead walls, for example. And it's important to note that many communication headsets, especially those used by military and first responders, do not limit the incoming radio volume, and the user could be overexposed. So training is super critical, and users must be told to try to listen at their lowest volume level in which they can hear the communications. The audio limiter is in these devices, if they're equipped with environmental listening, is coming in through, the limiter is coming in through that environmental microphone. So what is wrong with this picture here? I'm sure you've seen this before. Just because you see radios being used by workers doesn't mean there's good speech intelligibility and that the workers are communicating. Here we have some workers attempting to communicate with a radio and a lapel mic. I'm sure you've seen workers yelling into their lapel mics or leaning over to try to hear what is coming in through the radio, incoming radio message. Have you noticed workers are tempted to turn up their radio volume so that they can hear the signal or the voice over the noise? So radio systems alone are not a communication system. Some companies invest a ton of money into radio communication systems, but they forget about the last 12 inches to get the radio signal communication to the other side of the hearing protector so the recipient can hear the message. So I'm going to share with you some more audio simulations here. Let's see if I can get this going. You should be able to see it soon here. So this is under those 3 scenarios: open ear, passive hearing protection, and the use of a protective communication device. I'm going to stop and start these as best I can. So here's open ear with a jackhammer and somebody talking. Okay, that was open ear. Now we're going to go to what it would sound like if in that scenario you had a passive hearing protector on, like say a passive earmuffs. Now here's a simulation of what it would hear like if you were to wear a protective communication device.
Do you copy, Joe? Gonna need you to head over to Area B when you're done.
So that was an open ear with someone talking. I was on mute earlier, trying to get used to clicking all these buttons. And now we're going to have those two sounds underneath a passive hearing protector.
You got another couple of feet, Larry. Looking good.
And then the last one here is going to be what it would sound like for a protective communication device in those two sounds. And remember what I said about the passive portion helping to reduce the noise, and the protective communication portion, the electronics, actually help to amplify the signal. So we have a better signal to noise ratio. Here we go.
You got another couple of feet, Larry. Looking good.
Okay, I'm gonna go back. I'm going to talk to you, give you another case study of where protective communications has been used. It happens to be a 3M plant manufacturing place where we make tape, and we have a trainer there that helps to onboard new employees to learn the machinery. And under normal conditions, it's not an easy job because of the noise makes it very difficult with just passive hearing protectors being able to give direction to and educate that new worker on the machinery. So usually this gal would end up going home after a day and her voice was shot because she was yelling so much and huddling to try to get the information. Well, during the pandemic, they were required to stay 6 feet away. So they are using a solution, an overhead solution, communication integrated radio system. And what she found was that she was able to stay 6 feet away and give clear communication on how to work that machinery to that new person. And then she felt more secure knowing that she was getting the new hire information back. And what she found was that an unintended advantage that she discovered was that because of the environmental microphones and because the product had reduced the noise so much, she was able to hear when one of the machines was acting a little wonky, and she was able to identify that that particular part of that machine needed some maintenance done. So that, in her mind thought, oh, haha, we're gonna, regardless of whether we have a pandemic, we're going to be using these devices from now on because it helps to enhance her job, and she's able to train and onboard her new employee in a safe manner. So I'm going to go on to another poll. You want to pull that poll up for me? How likely will you consider using protective communication for you or your workers? Not likely, likely, or very likely?
Just waiting for some results, Pegine. So, how likely will you consider using protective communication? The highest number is 47% at likely. Next is 34% at very likely, and 19% said not likely.
Great, super. Thanks for taking part in our poll. So to recap, advanced hearing protection and communication solutions can be divided into 3 categories. We talked about protective hearing and protective communication solutions. Remember that the hearing protection capabilities are the same as their passive hearing protector counterpart, but these have special electronic technologies such as environmental listening and noise canceling microphones. And that's what sets them apart from the others, and that's why we call them advanced. So be aware that many of these technologies overlap between these two categories. So you'll have some radio systems that will have environmental microphones and vice versa, or some in-ear solutions that can be combined with a neck loop to make them more of a communication device. So many more than we could really highlight in this training. It's just a matter of understanding what the worker's needs are, and then figuring out what's the best solution for that worker. So I'm going to hand it back over to Bev now.
Thanks, Peggy, and thanks for the information on the protective communication solutions. So let's now look at cleaning, disinfection, and hygiene practices. With the pandemic, there is an increased focus on cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting, and this most likely applies to much of the PPE you have in use. Different cleaning disinfection processes may be in place and may have changed, and it also depends if your PPE is dedicated to one person or shared amongst workers. It is important to follow the manufacturer's instructions for cleaning and disinfecting. An important reminder, conduct frequent inspections of your hearing protection device, especially with the increased cleaning and disinfection. Highlighted on the screen here, and you'll be able to get the link when you receive the presentation, is a 3M technical bulletin specific for cleaning and disinfecting our protection and communication solutions. We do have this tech bulletin available in both French and English, and they can be found at our website, and that's www.3m.ca/coronavirus, being one word, or /coronavirus FR for French. We have come to the last part of our webinar today, dedicated to offering you some strategies for assessing audibility and communication within your workplace. I'll review some broad questions you can ask for your hearing loss prevention program, or your hearing conservation program. The terms are interchangeable. And I'll share items to consider when you observe workers, review a walkthrough assessment, and lastly, questions to consider when talking with your workers. Here are some general questions to consider when you're reviewing your overall hearing conservation program. Do you know what the noise exposure is at your workplace? How hazardous is that noise level? What do workers need, or what do they want to hear while working? Are there critical sounds or communication needed? Are workers okay with reduced hearing due to the use of their hearing protection device? For hearing impaired workers, do you know the effect on them when they're wearing a hearing protector? And lastly, are you aware of any effects that the selection you have available in your workplace, that what effects are on safety, productivity, or efficiency? You may be inclined to review your program from a risk assessment point of view, and that's looking at the risks, evaluating, and incorporating new things into your hearing conservation program. So if I'm looking at the higher risks, are there warning signals or machineries that need to be heard? Is there any potential of collision with moving vehicles? Is communication critical? When I'm looking at evaluate your noise, evaluate your workers' hearing ability. Hearing protection attenuation can be also determined through a fit test system, and evaluate whether the hearing solution works for that worker. And then incorporate audibility in communication into your hearing loss prevention program or your hearing conservation program. Add these expanded selection criteria. Observe the way in which workers communicate is important as well. Are they huddled together? Peggy mentioned that earlier. And are they speaking loudly to communicate? Look for people wearing protection and using two-way radios. What happens if they can't hear? Can improved communication help enhance their productivity? Look for any physical hazards, fork trucks moving equipment. Can they hear the alarms? What degree of auditory awareness is needed? And can this be improved to help reduce the potential for injuries? Do a workplace walkthrough. Walk through the hazardous noise areas and observe for the following 6 areas. Are workers consistently wearing their hearing protection incorrectly? And if so, ask them why. Are they in periods of intermittent noise? What happens when the noise dissipates and when it returns? What are workers doing with their hearing protector? Are workers struggling or removing hearing protection for face-to-face communication? Are workers moving in and out of noise without wearing hearing protection? When they return back to that noise, do they put their hearing protector back on? Are workers struggling or removing hearing protection to hear electronic communications? And lastly, is there any observable impact on work efficiency related to inability to communicate? Worker survey. Here are some questions you might want to ask your employees when they come in for their hearing conservation assessment. And this could be their audiogram, hearing protection fit testing, their training session. Find a time that you can ask these questions. What do you need to hear to perform your job? Do you sometimes remove hearing protectors to hear better while working? Do you feel comfortable that you can hear safety alarms or other important sounds in your work environment? What are these sounds that you need to hear? And lastly, do you use electronic communication devices, such as the radio systems, as part of your duties? Do you have any trouble hearing these communications? This quote from the CSA standard Z1007, Hearing Loss Prevention Program Management, which was published back in 2016, summarizes the importance of audibility in workplaces. Being in touch with their environment can provide workers with a sense of safety. The human self-preservation mechanism relies on hearing as the primary self-protection mechanism. Removing auditory contact with warning sounds and interpersonal communication causes some workers enough concern that they might disable some or all of the attenuation of their hearing protection so they feel safe. This is why it's important to consider advanced hearing protection and communication solutions so that workers have the ability to not only hear and communicate, but can do so while maintaining proper physical distancing. This is the end of our presentation today, but I'll just cover 2 more slides before we go to the Q&A. So here are some resources for you. And the blog that Peggy referred to on overprotection is listed here as the first resource here. Now I will give it back to Marcel so we can open it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Bev and Pegeen. We do have time for a few questions from the audience. And I believe this first question should be directed at Pegeen. A listener asks, for workers who have hearing loss and are not able to use personal hearing aids on site, would the electronic earplugs or muffs assist with communication in this application?
Well, what I would say there is that every situation is different, so you'd have to analyze or assess what's going on there. Certainly, if people are in and out of quiet areas, the environmental microphones could be, with the amplification, could help a hearing impaired person. The hearing conservation professional overseeing the hearing conservation program should probably consult, they can consult their audiologist in that case. And usually these things are managed on a case-to-case basis. But I would say the CSA standard, Z1007-16, does recommend a person with a hearing aid remove the hearing aid while they're in hazardous noise, and to use an electronic hearing protector with ambient listening or environmental listening. So I would say for even normal hearing people, it would be an advantage to be able to hear your surroundings, and even more so with someone who has hearing impairment.
Thanks, Pegeen. Another question is, can these devices be obtained for a trial before purchase?
I'll take that question. Yes, so for 3M, so first of all, it does depend on the manufacturer of the product, so you'd have to follow up with a certain manufacturer. And I can only speak to 3M, and in Canada, we do have a demo program so that you can trial and determine the best communication option. You can go to our 3M Canada website, which is listed in the resource page of the presentation here, or ask your local sales specialist, and we can set up a product trial.
Thanks, Bev. Another question, how do the electronics in these headsets affect the attenuation, the NRR or the CSA class?
I can take that one. So when electronic hearing protectors are tested in the laboratory for their labeled value, their noise reduction rating or CSA class, the electronics are actually turned off. So what you're getting there is a noise reduction rating in their passive mode. If a device is electronic and is labeled as a hearing protector, then the electronic circuit has to have a limiter that prevents sound from being reproduced at an unsafe level. So your NRR labels are in the passive mode. And just be sure that anything that you're bringing into your facility has a labeled value, so that you know that it's been okayed as a hearing protection device.
Perfect. We have a couple more questions. This one is, we have a few employees that wear these types of headsets, but they share them across shifts. With the current pandemic, what can we do to clean the headsets?
It's Bev here. So that's a good question. So again, first check with the manufacturer of their headsets to ask for guidance on their cleaning and disinfecting processes to make sure that it's compatible. If it is a 3M Pelter communication headset, as I spoke earlier, we have a technical data bulletin that addresses how to both clean and disinfect our products against COVID-19, and it is available in French and English.
Perfect. Thanks, Bev. And our final question today is the following. Do communications devices come in earplug style or earmuff style only?
Actually, yes, they come in both earplug and earmuff options. And in terms of the earmuff options, they also come in different styles. So you can get headsets that go over the head, or they're cap attached to helmets or hard hats, and there are behind the head models as well.
Perfect. All right, that's all the questions we have today. I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and as well as Bev and Pegeen for presenting. Thank you so much. If you have more specific questions, you can refer to the email addresses on the screen. Thanks so much and have a great day.